This Esther scroll is from the beginning of the 16th century. The analysis of the parch and the Hebrew letters revealed that it was probably done by a person who fled Spain to northern France and settled in an Ashkenazi Jewish community. From France, it traveled to Fez, Morocco, to join its renowned Sephardi community. This scroll arrived in Israel in the 1960s and was donated to our collection lately. From Spain to northern France to Morocco to Israel, this Esther scroll traveled in the footsteps of Sephardi Jews.
This magnificent amulet is on loan to our museum from a private collection in Casale Monferrato, Italy. It has an outstanding story. It was gifted to Elda Wallenberg Corinaldi on her wedding day on April 1925. During the fascist regime and the Second World War, the Corinaldi family had to flee their house not before concealing all their valuables in a double wall in their house, which was later seized by the Italian military. 2 years after the war ended, the family returned to their house to find all their valuables awaiting them, including this amulet. This is a typical Italian amulet, also known as a Shaddai. It has beautiful ornaments on it and also an amulet for protection inside of it. We're very happy we'll have this on our exhibition.
This is the work of Andy Arnowitz. It is called Kaparot. There is a white piece, feminine kapara, and a black one that is the masculine kapara. I'm going to show you the white one. A kapara, or Erev Yom Kippur, it is traditional for us to take a chicken and to pass the chicken over our heads and to say that this is our kapara, that the chicken will absorb our sins. Andy, who is an animal rights activist, thought that she should create a Judaica piece, a ritual piece, that we wouldn't have to kill any animal. And this piece is made of feathers and strings and plastic and has on it sins that are normative sins. It's not, I'm not going to kill or steal or commit adultery, but little things that every normative person might do is leave the empty jar in the refrigerator or talk not nicely about my friend. And so those are the different sins that all make up both the black and the white piece.
This is the Lublin diorama. The Lublin diorama came to me, it was in fairly good condition. It was very dirty, but we did have some structural problems. We had problems with the railings that are made out of wood, and mainly in the back, and some in the top were broken. We also had some figures that have been broken in the past. It is over 40 years old, and so those had to be placed in their positions. The one interesting story we have is this old man that I noticed that had only one foot, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. Where was the other foot? Then I noticed his hand was empty, but there was a place there that I could tell something was in there. So we did some research. We found out that the old man came in with a cane in his hand back in the 70s, and so we recreated the cane, and now he looks complete.
This is the work of Kenny Goldman. It is called Kaddish. He took 74 stones and he engraved the words, each word of Kaddish, on stones that he found from where he lived on his kibbutz. It kind of had a personal side to this story. His daughter was on her way to a March of the Living to Poland, and he wanted to give her something that would make this a more meaningful trip. And he wanted to give her these stones that she would place in Auschwitz as she was coming to the concentration camp in all different parts of the camp. So she would place Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, and then another group would come from Texas, and another group would come from New York, and from France, and from Bnei Brak, and all over the world, and they would keep saying these words of Kaddish, and she would create this virtual Kaddish.
This small medallion has a huge story. It belonged to the great-great-great-grandmother of the woman who loaned it to our collection. This grandmother lived in Mashhad, Iran, in a time where the Jews were forced to become Muslims. If you look closely at the center of the medallion, you'll see a picture of Fatima, wife of Muhammad, the Muslim prophet. Now, during the 200 years in which the Jews of Mashhad lived as crypto-Jews, the women used to smuggle Torah scrolls and prayer books under their gowns to bring them to the places where the men were praying. In order to not look suspicious on the street, they used to hang this medallion on their neck. So we can assume the great-great-great-grandmother of our lender was one of those women.
This is a volume of the Babylonian Talmud printed by Daniel Bomberg in Venice, 1528. Bomberg, who was a Christian printer, was the first to print a full edition of the Babylonian Talmud. The importance of Bomberg's editions are twofold. Not only it made the entire Talmud accessible to the learners who previously had to look after partial manuscripts of the Talmud, but also it set the iconic Talmud page layout as we know it today. The main text of the Talmud in the center, Rashi's commentary on the outer margins, and the Tosfot commentary on the inner margins.
This Hebrew typewriter belonged to the great Yiddish author, the Nobel Prize for Literature laureate, Isaac Bashevis Singer. Bashevis Singer immigrated to America from Poland shortly before World War II. His wife and baby son were left behind. They later immigrated to Israel. Years later, Bashevis Singer renewed his relationship with his son and often came to visit him in Israel, and during the 1970s, even stayed here for a few months. And this is his typewriter on which he was writing his books during his many visits in Israel. He left it to his son, who left it to his daughter, who donated it to our collection to be displayed in an exhibition about modern Jewish literature.